And welcome back to the Wellness Paradox podcast. I'm so grateful that you can join us on this journey towards greater human flourishing. As always, I'm your host, Michael Stack, an exercise physiologist by training and a health entrepreneur and a health educator by trade. And I'm fascinated by a phenomena I call the wellness paradox. This paradox, as I view it, is the trust, interaction, and communication gap that exists between fitness professionals and our healthcare community. This podcast is all about closing off that gap by disseminating the latest, most evidence-based, and most engaging information in the health sciences, all in an effort to ensure that fitness professionals can become part of our healthcare continuum. And to do that, in episode 36, I'm joined by Akai Jackson. Akai was just recently voted America's favorite mindfulness coach. And this is a discussion that is much more than about mindfulness. Certainly, those components will be in the conversation, but this is more of a discussion on mental health. And I don't have to tell anyone who's listening right now the mental health crisis that we're in as a country. We were in a mental health crisis before COVID. COVID has certainly exacerbated it. What I think is critical to know about this conversation and what we're going to dive into with Akai is that fitness professionals play a critical role in the mental health of our communities and our clients. I think for so long we've sold ourselves short by telling ourselves we're only here to help people address their body when we also help them address their mind, their intellect, and even their spirit. That's what this conversation is going to dive into. I think you're going to find it particularly insightful, informative, and also inspiring. That's certainly a great word I would use to describe Akai. Any information that we want to share from this episode can be found on the show notes page by going to wellnessparadoxpod.com/episode 36. Please enjoy this conversation with Akai Jackson. Today, we're delighted to be joined by Akai Jackson. Akai, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I am very excited for this conversation because we actually haven't talked very much about meditation yet on the Wellness Paradox podcast. And full disclosure, meditation is a practice that has changed my life. And Akai, you actually don't know this because we haven't talked about it prior, but meditation was something I got into after my divorce, and it really changed my whole perspective on anxiety in the world. And so I'm so excited to get into this. But before we dive into this discussion, I'd just like to know a little bit more about your background to provide our audience some context.
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Akai Jackson. I'm originally from Baltimore, Maryland. I now live in bright, sunny Orlando, Florida. I've been here since 2004. I actually got my start in the fitness industry. I worked in large commercial health clubs. The company that I got started with was actually called Lifestyle Family Fitness. At one point, we were the largest privately owned and operated health and fitness brand in the industry. We were number one in PT. You know, you had to have a degree in either biomechanics or kinesiology in order to even interview with the organization. So, you know, in the tail end of, I guess you could say the, 2000s into 2010, we just were professional, right? And we actually went through a certification with them from PTA Global, Mike, and it was actually the behavioral change in exercise with them. So my background being business and psychology, I actually was able to take psychology, merge it with kinesiology, physiology, biomechanics, and really just created a niche for myself, which is actually how IXL got started.
Awesome. Yeah, I love your background because I think like a lot of us, we take different avenues to where we end up in our career. And the fact that you've kind of gone through the lens of commercial fitness, which is what a lot of our listeners are in day to day right now, I think makes this a more impactful conversation. Tell us more about IXL today and the things that you're doing.
Yeah, so I actually am the founder and CEO of IXL today. We are a personal and professional development agency, and we curate mindset shift programs that take our clients from just existing to excelling in all things mental health, physical health, social health, environmental health, as well as financial health.
Love it. Love it. And so needed right now. And it's interesting. We're sitting here and we're recording this in early January, or excuse me, early December. I hate to spoil the magic for people, but we don't do these live. And as we're sitting here now, I'm struck by the fact that the Surgeon General last week came out with an advisement regarding the mental health status of our youth. And the Surgeon General doesn't put these proclamations out just flippantly. Like, these are very, very important statements about public health issues in our country. Before we dive into how fitness and wellness professionals can use mindset and meditation work to assist them in their craft, just talk a little bit for a second from your perspective on where we're at from a mental health status as a country as we still go through this very challenging time of the pandemic.
Yeah. Kind of like you said, we know there's a problem, right? I mean, it's very evident that there's a problem. I mean, in 2019, just prior to COVID, about 20% of adults experienced a mental illness, and that's equivalent to about 50 million Americans, right? Suicidal ideations continue to increase in adults, right now. And I mean, it's been increasing actually since 2010. And I actually spoke at a youth summit over the weekend. And prior to me going, I was looking over some notes and looking over some statistics. And it says right now that the average middle school and high school student is actually experiencing 50 times the amount of stress as any adult in this country right now. So it's actually 53% of teens and middle school age students are experiencing anxiety, depression, stress, being overworked, overwhelmed, frustrated, and confused to the adults, which is about 29%. So there's staggering statistics that tell us that anxiety, depression, frustration, confusion, mental health is definitely a pandemic and something that I believe we do need to push to the forefront. And I feel like every person, regardless of background, knowledge, has the ability to plug into some sort of source and lend their story to help people who are combating the mental health crisis in this country today.
Yeah, they're staggering statistics. They really, really are. I am heartened, and I'd be curious to just have you touch on this for a moment. The one thing that gives me hope to a degree with the mental health issues that we're facing in this country, we seem to have destigmatized it a little bit more recently. It seems to be more out there in the open. What's your perspective on the stigma associated with mental illness now in 2021, almost 2022, compared to 2010 or 2015? I feel like we're moving in the right direction.
I do feel like we're moving in the right direction, Mike. And, I actually have had this talk with some friends of mine, right, who are life coaches and things like that, who are a little bit more mature and a little older than I am. I'm like, did mental health, did these issues exist 20 years ago? I mean, I'm still fairly young, right? I'm 36, and I just don't remember having this type of depression, anxiety, frustration, overwork. Like I just didn't experience it that much. And so now I think that we do talk about it, and it is something that we do need to talk about because it is very rampant. And you're right, the statistics are staggering, right? Like a growing percentage of youth in the US live with major depression. 15% of youth experienced a major depressive episode in the past year. That's a 2% increase from last year's data set. So I do think that we are moving in the right direction as far as pushing mental health to the forefront and releasing the stigma on, hey, this is just something that you don't talk about, right? I think as men, Mike, growing up, I think especially growing up and playing sports, you hear certain things like be a man, like rub some dirt on it if it hurts, right? Or even just things like walk it off, men don't cry, don't talk about it, like we don't show weakness. Without really realizing what we're doing with that. And we're teaching people how to suppress emotions. So, when you do life in any realm as a unit, as a pair, as a team, just like the muscles work, right? Like you have an antagonist, protagonist. That's how life works. Life is not meant to be done in isolation. So when you're isolated and you're with your own thoughts and your own mind and your own, junk, if you will, if you're not taught how to regulate those things, understand those things, recognize those things, express those things, label those things properly, we're fighting an uphill battle with no arms and legs. And I think that right now we definitely have to do our due diligence to continue to push mental health to the forefront.
Yeah, and you said it right there. And I think it's interesting. Without having the tools to deal with all of those challenges, I feel like, particularly with our youth, but you also said it, we're kind of enculturated as a male gender. We don't necessarily get those tools in school, grade school, high school, college. Emotional intelligence, coping skills, mindfulness skills. That's not really built into curriculums as we're growing up.
No, it's not at all. And we talk about that a lot, right? Like parents, teen, like we're just not equipped to to do that. You're right. Like they don't teach critical thinking too much anymore. The cause and effect is gone. You're right. Connectivity and coping skills are actually, they make up like 40% of how you actually have the ability to aid and help in mental health curing. And it's something that we just don't talk about. If you find most people when they're upset, sick, hurt, whatever the case may be, the number one thing that they do is remove themselves from any situation. So they put themselves in isolation. Right. And then in doing that, they suppress those emotions, they suppress those feelings, and then they're not taught to express them, like you said. And we definitely need to do a fantastic job or a better job of making sure that we reach out and touch, reach out and send a text, reach out and, hey, I'm just thinking about you, those types of things. Even just that helps and goes a long way.
Yeah. And I think that's why this conversation is so important, because we're just another avenue to put this out there. And I heard you speak down in Nashville at the Club Industry Executive Summit, which was a great event. And you were part of a panel that I think just crushed it, and so much great information. I was feverishly taking notes, and we're going to dive into, I think, a lot of elements of what you talked about and that group talked about in this conversation. But just as kind of like at a level setting point for everyone that's listening, and at the risk of being like overly obvious here, why do fitness and wellness professionals need to be so keyed in to mental health and mental illness? Because typically we think of worrying about orthopedic issues, like, does this person have a knee issue? Does this person have a shoulder issue? What's going on with their back? But we don't spend as much time thinking about someone's mental health or their mental illness status. Why do we need to be so attuned to this?
I believe we need to be so in tune with that because we do facilitate change and touch so many lives on a daily and consistent basis. And specifically in the personal training realm, right? Like you get a lot of people's life story, personal information, because, the first word in that is personal, right? Like, so you're involved with lives, kids' names, birthdays, anniversaries, exactly what's going on in this person's life if you ask the right questions. And so because you are essentially being interwoven in every single part of this person's life, right? You're essentially controlling what they eat, when they eat it, and why they're eating it. You essentially control how much sleep this person gets. You are the bridge between I'm having a very crappy day and I need an outlet, right? So you being a person, or we being people who have the ability to help people go from I have to go do this to I get to go do it, we are very much in the forefront of being able to do just that. Because, how often are you seeing your doctor, right? Once every couple months, unless you have something ailing or, something going on. How often are you seeing, a nurse practitioner or your physical therapist, or your mental health therapist for that? I mean, it's still once a week-ish or something like that. But one of the things you do normally tend to do is you go to the gym and you walk on a treadmill. You go to the gym and meet up with your friends. You go to the park and meet up with your friends and work out. You're involved in some part of community that has some sort of foothold in working out, right? So as a fitness practitioner, as a personal trainer, or whatever the case may be, we are the boots on the ground, first point of contact for people. And I think that is partly why we need to be in the forefront and making sure that we check up on mental health for sure.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point. I think back to early in my career as a trainer, and there was a lot of cases where I was the first person to hear about a significant event in
Mhm.
somebody's life, both good and bad, because they didn't have another safe place to be able to share it. And let's be clear, we're not psychologists as personal trainers. We have a scope of practice, and I'm sure we're going to get into this as the conversation goes on. If we hear things that are very disconcerting, we need to have the ability to refer and provide resources. But I think
Correct.
your point's very well taken, is that we are a consistent point of allied health contact for not just our clients, but also the members in our gyms and our clubs,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And I mean, a lot of us are gravitationally attractive, right? Not necessarily by physique, but because of how we carry ourselves, right? How we move, the fact that they see us helping people all the time. Even if you walk into a fitness facility and you feel uncomfortable and all you do is click a button on a treadmill because it's green and green means go and red means stop, right? When you're walking, you're still observing. And what
Yeah.
you're observing is, hey, that guy with the dark hair over there, man, he looks really helpful. When I get the courage, I'm going to ask him a question,
Yeah.
right? Hey, that guy over there, hey, that girl over there, she, there's something about her that, that is really attractive. They just don't usually have the courage or the wherewithal to maybe come up and spark a conversation. And that is why, as I was running health clubs and having staff of trainers, I said, listen, you shake hands and high five every single person in this gym. It is your responsibility and your job to meet 5 new people every day. Well, Kai, what do we do when we've met everybody? Start to get to know them, right?
Yeah.
Hey, man, where do you go shopping? Hey, where do you do this? Hey, what's this? What's your wife's name? What's your aunt's name? What's your uncle's name? Hey, tell me about your life. What's your story? And being able to do that, like you said, Mike, you have the ability to become an ally. And then these people share things, whether they are good or they are bad. You become a resource for these people. And again, to our point, that's exactly why we need to continue to, push that forward and let people know that we are here for them.
Yeah, and I want to start to make this actionable for our audience, and I want to make it actionable on 2 levels. One will be a broader level, and then the other one will be a more specific level. And let me try to frame this up on both levels. When I was in Nashville and I listened to you and the group talk, it was very much a conversation on a broader level about members of the gym and members of the club and understanding people who may be going through mental health struggles, and
Mhm.
then maybe providing them some resources. That's the first thing I would like to talk about a little bit, because again, we are in the front lines. And then I'll follow up with a more in-depth question on how we handle this with individual clients that we have a more longer term relationship. So to circle back to the first part, we're in our clubs, we see people, we know their affect, we know their personalities. If we think a member of our club is going through some mental health struggles, how would you suggest approaching that, and what resources do we have at our disposal?
There's a lot of resources, for me, when again running health clubs and being I'd say a pillar, of health in my community. One of the things that we established very early on was a circle of influence, right? We partnered with different businesses and different brands to be able to, obviously it was a win-win for everybody. Hey, we'll put a marketing place in your facility and we'll broadcast you at our facility, right? So we were looking to partner with mental health professionals, therapists, right? We were looking to partner with any other avenue in the health and fitness realm that we actually didn't offer, as a place for us to be able to be trusted, right? So, Mike, you're my client. You come to me and I can tell that you're battling something, struggling with something that's a little bit more advanced outside of what I feel comfortable. I say, hey, listen, I'm going to give you a referral. I want you to go see Dr. So-and-so, or I want you to go see Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so. And I will go ahead and call them ahead of time and let them know that you are coming, right? I think that just being able to be a contact, being able to refer people out in close proximity, because if they trust you and you're sending them to someone you trust, everyone's being trusted with this information, regardless of how big or small. And I think that is one of the ways that we have the ability to do that. Mental health first aid, which one of my colleagues talked about at Nashville, or in the Nashville, the executive summit. That's a huge resource for people like you, myself, who are actually practitioners to some degree in, in fitness and health, being able to go and be able to learn how to recognize signs of anxiety, depression, even just asking a question of, how do you feel? See, as a society, we're stuck in this finiteness, right? Where we're, hey, how you doing? I'm good. I'm fine. I'm well. Okay, great.
Yeah.
And so you get these 3-4 letter monopoly words like Scrabble words, right? And they have no bearing. They have no meaning. So we're just stuck in this finitist piece. But when you have the ability to, Mike, how are you feeling? Right? How are you really feeling? And you ask them to pick 3 words and you make them tell you words that aren't 3-4 letters long. They have to think, then they get the ability to tell you how they feel. And if you're hearing words like, I'm anxious, I'm stressed, I'm depressed, I'm overwhelmed, you have the ability to then, again, try to, move that in a direction where you can establish some trust. You can let them know, hey, listen, I actually don't know, right, how to handle that. But what I do know is that working out today, we are going to make you feel better than when you walked in here. That is going to be my goal. And then when you do leave here, before you leave here, I'm going to give you a couple of resources that I think can actually move you in the right direction. See, it's okay to not know the answer to a problem, but it is not okay for us to not be solution-minded and solution-driven when it comes to aiding and helping people, break through these types of barriers and limitations.
Yeah, that mental health first aid was something that I was really struck by in that conversation. And we'll link up to some information in the show notes, but I was actually sitting there as the group was talking about that. And I was kind of shocked and embarrassed that I had never heard of it before, because I think like every single member of my staff is CPR and AED certified. Like we wouldn't have a club if we didn't have those kind of certifications.
Correct.
Knock on wood, in the 14 years of my company, no one has had to use the AED and no one has had to perform CPR. Yet, how many people are in here right now, as I have this conversation with you, that are struggling with depression and anxiety, and giving my team the ability to be able to know how to handle those conversations? Because, Akai, I really think that unless you have those tools as a professional, the idea of having a conversation with somebody around their mental health is probably terrifying for your average 23 or 24-year-old trainer, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why, this particular certification that we got, this behavioral change and exercise from PTA Global, was so life altering for me. My minor in college was psychology, and I've always been fascinated by the little things, right? Like, why are restaurant signs blue, yellow, and red? Yeah. Like, I wanted to know, right, for marketing standpoint. But it's why are things these colors? Why do things move like this? Why are things this way? I was taught to question everything. And then when you move that into making sure that we're paying attention to looking at changing people's behaviors, we realized that we are actually dealing with people's minds. So it was frustrating, right, for as a trainer, for me to even go through the process, right? So you do an application, right? You do a PAR-Q. What are your goals? What can I help you with? What time frame would you like to complete this in? Do you have any bone or joint issues? All that all the physical things, right? But we never really dove into the behaviors, the things like, Mrs. Jones, what do you do when you're stressed? Yeah. Mrs. Jones tends to go home, crack open a bottle of her favorite beverage, and she proceeds to douse that thing as if it is going to help her feel better. She has an emotional connection to that thing, but is the problem, Michael, that she wants to do that, or is the problem actually that she thinks that is her? So when we have the ability to move and change that behavior, we have the ability to create transformational change in people. We have the ability to take mindset shifts and move them from, like I say, just from existing to excelling. We teach people how to maneuver through life and teach them those types of coping skills. So, I got that certification at 22, 23. It was life altering for me. It was life altering for me, and it's actually what we've been able to build a platform on. So
Awesome. And you're going exactly where I wanted to go next is we started really broad at the club level, and you started to talk about some of these programs that you've developed with the knowledge of psychology and how emotions work. To the extent can you kind of unpack that a little bit for our audience? What should our fitness and wellness professionals be thinking about programmatically with regard to health behavior change?
Yeah, so we do like motivational interviewing, right? I think a lot of and this is like industry, right? So I think in the late 80s, early 90s, if you were a personal trainer, you were a bodybuilder, right? And you thought that everybody wanted to walk, talk, look, and act like you, right? And I think that was true. Prior to that, it was all about the equipment. We had Nautilus, we've got hammer strength, we've got this type of equipment. So the gym goers were infused with, we want to go to this gym because it's got the best equipment. Then it was, all the people here are bodybuilders, so we want to look like them, walk like them, talk like them, act like them. So we're going to do that. Then that moved into, we're going to wow everybody with science. All of our trainers have degrees. So you're actually getting a professional at doing this and someone who wants to do this as a career. And then I'd probably say 2010, there was a very drastic shift in the industry. And as it became a little bit more online, it became a little bit more, I don't care if they're certified. I don't care if they have degrees. I don't care about any of that. They look like that. I want to look like them. And they just take influencers, right? And anyone who looks good, smells good, acts good, right? That's where a lot of people are getting information from. So it's actually kind of polarized the industry a little bit. But, to say that, right, just moving in the right direction, I think that, just being able to, from a standpoint of, hey, Michael, what'd you eat last night? What'd you have for dinner? What time was your last meal? Those types of things determine how today's workout is going to be. If I have the hardest workout known on planet Earth built in for you today, and you didn't sleep well last night, and you didn't eat this morning, right? You have nothing to give you energy. Would I be doing you any good if I give you the hardest workout on planet Earth today? Probably not. I would actually be doing more harm than good. So when I start asking you questions, how do you feel? Oh, well, I feel okay. Listen, Mike, we need to go a little bit deeper than that, right? How do you actually feel? Tell me about your day. And I'm actually looking for words like, it was hard. It was stressed. I'm looking at things like what this person does for work, right? If they're a doctor, are they stressed? Sure. If they're a nurse in today's world, are they stressed? Sure. If they're a teacher, are they stressed? Yup. Right? If they're just a stay-at-home mom, are they stressed? Yeah. If they're a mom, if they're a mom of 5 kids, and she owns her own business, is she stressed? Yup. Listen, I said it on stage in Nashville, and I will beat this drum for the rest of my life. Everybody is walking around every day stressed beyond belief, with anxiety, frustration, and the feeling of overwhelm every day, all day. And all they want is a person to make them feel special. Treat them like gold, accept them for who they are, where they are, and be able to extend hands of acceptance and being able to say, hey, listen, I'm right here with you, and we are going to get through this together with whatever scope or practice they feel comfortable, executing at that play. Does that make sense? You track with that?
Yeah. And I couldn't agree more. And I feel like as our society becomes more complex, as it becomes more polarized, as it moves faster, that level of stress that you're talking about that exists now is just going to be amplified in the future. Our world is not going to become a less stressful place 10, Agreed. 15, 20 years from now.
Agreed. No, I agree. And I mean, I think, and that's partly why we've shifted into, these buckets, right? We found that people are always stressed about money. Right? People are always stressed about, let's be honest, like looking better naked, right? That's probably why most people work out, right? They want to look good in clothes and out of clothes, right? We understand that there's a lot of social anxiety, right? Especially in teens because of not necessarily about how they're being raised, but if you look at generationally how kids even function and operate with each other. When I was growing up, we got kicked out of the house on a weekend at 9 o'clock in the morning. We were told to come back around noon for lunch. And then we were kicked back out of the house at 1 o'clock and told to come back before the streetlights come on. What we did Like, not that they didn't care, but it was just like a figure it out. And now we've got iPads and iPhones raising kids a lot of the times, right? So there's a lot less social interaction that, you know, teens are experiencing. So when they have face-to-face conversations with someone, it makes them uncomfortable. It makes them uncomfortable. So what do? They isolate, they turn. And again, life is not meant to be done in isolation. Life is a team sport, just like how the body works. Again, protagonist, antagonist. You have a muscle that works to produce force. You have a muscle that works to reduce force. Your life works just like that. You have friends or a close group of people that are meant to produce you moving forward in things. And then you have friends who are supposed to be there to make sure you don't hurt yourself, right? So when you remove yourself from that equation, you are actually not doing your due diligence for you to be the best version of yourself in that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned motivational interviewing, and this is a podcast onto itself, and it's a whole college course onto itself on some level. Can you just, for our listeners, just define motivational interviewing and talk about a few characteristics of it, because it really is a transformative coaching skill.
Yeah. So you have, you know, intrinsic motivation, you have external motivation, right? So internally, you know, what's my why, right? And I think that most people they look at what, why, and how, but they start with the wrong practicality. They start with what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do it. And then the last thing that they focus on is the why. Mm-hmm. And I think that actually needs to be flipped on its end. And it's why am I actually doing what it is that I'm doing, right? So as a practitioner and as someone who walks in this every day, when I wake up every day, it's the why am I going to do what it is that I'm doing to attack this, you know, small goal that is a series of small goals that takes me to my larger goal. So if I've got an income goal of, say, $100,000, most people will say what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. And the last thing that they pay attention to is the why. Mm-hmm. Where in fact, they need to start with the why, because it will serve as their intrinsic motor for them to move forward in practicality, right? With what it is that they're accomplishing. No different than I want to lose 50 pounds this year. Okay, cool. The what's important, the how's important, but it is not as important as the why, because once you understand the why, you know, it becomes something that is the motor and the driving force that moves you forward into whatever it is that you're looking at doing. If you have a social goal, you know what? It crushed me, right? We stayed at home, you know, 10 days, you know, out of the month. I didn't interact with anybody. We didn't talk to anybody. My social goal for this year is to get out of the house 5 days a week and do something interactive. What and how? Super important. Why? Even more important. What's the driving force? What are the anchors? What are the roots that allow you to move forward into practicality and whatever it is that you're looking at doing?
Love it. And I've always said that people give up on, let's say, a goal of losing 20 pounds all the time. Like every day people give up on that goal. But if you want to lose the 20 pounds because you want to be healthier to play with your kids, people aren't giving up on that goal because they understand their why. But just losing 20 pounds is an empty goal unless you attach it to something deeper.
Correct. And as someone who is in this field, we actually have to do a better job of asking the right questions. Right. So the motivational interviewing, right? We talk about the trans-theoretical model, right? Mm-hmm. It is one of those things where we're talking about pre-contemplation, contemplation, prepping, planning, action, and you have maintenance and relapse. So as a trainer, right, when you ask the proverbial question on every part Q, it's, you know, Mike, on a scale of 1 to 10, right? 10 being the greatest, you know, how excited are you to be talking to me today? Oh, tell me. Oh, it's a 10. Okay, cool. So Mike, on a scale of 1 to 10, you know, how committed to you, you know, how committed to your goals are you? And they hear 10. And so most trainers, they go, oh, it's a 10. Like, so they're ready, they're moving, like they want this. And then when they go, okay, cool. So Mrs. Jones, that's going to cost X, your investment is X. And here's what we're doing. And it's, let me think about it. It's one of those, well, I don't understand. It's confusing. Well, it's only confusing because we didn't actually ask the right question. And Mrs. Jones actually wasn't ready because we didn't know what phase she was actually in. So a part of, asking questions is actually moving people through that model, right? It's taking you from, well, are you actually thinking about it? Or are you ready to take action? And there's some cues that you have the ability to pay attention to that will tell you if this person is actually ready to take action, and that's part of what we do. It's, everyone has this thought of, I think I need to lose weight, or I think I need to gain weight, or I think I need to spend more time with my kids, or I think I need to make more money. I think I need to out earn my problem. I think I need to go get a second job. Whatever it is, you're still thinking about it. You're gathering and collecting information, but you might not act on that for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 months.
Yep.
Right. And as you're gathering information, you're starting to, okay, does this make sense? What's the risk reward, right? Because I'm going to have a fight or flight in this based on my experience. If I've tried to lose weight in the past, Mike, and I lost 10 pounds, and then I gained 12, and then I lost 6, and then I gained 8. And then all of a sudden my body's always hurting because I'm running on the treadmill and I'm lifting weights. Why do I want to experience that anymore? So I'm actually going through this. Is it worth it?
Yep.
And then if I don't prep or plan properly, right, how many days a week do I have to do this? Do I have the time? Is the gym convenient to work, or is it convenient to home, or both? I'm going to be sacrificing time. Am I willing to go through this? Once all that prepping and planning takes place, then we can get all our questions answered. Then we can move forward into action, right? And then even in action, you might fall back into pre-contemplation, contemplation, prepping, or planning. Right. And when you do that, because it's going to happen, we as professionals have to be there and say, okay, recognize what phase they're in, and then go through the process again. And you're going to do this over and over and over and over again. You as a professor, you do it with your students all the time. Right. It's hey, how do we get an A in this class? You give them a syllabus. Right.
Yeah.
This is how you get an A in this class. Does everybody get an A? No, it's not because they don't understand the material. It's because they don't put the daily habits into doing what they're supposed to do to produce the A,
I'm so glad you unpacked all that, because it just speaks to how subtle and nuanced all of this is. And to that end, I'll just say, we'll link up to, you mentioned the trans-theoretical model of change, or the stages of change model. You mentioned motivational interviewing. We'll link up to some resources. Those are really skills that you can develop. And I'm sure you have some resources that we can also link up to in the show notes page to help practitioners develop these skills. And I think it is such an important area. I'd like to take a quick break from today's episode to tell you a little something about one of our sponsors. As all of you are well aware, addressing the wellness paradox is a lifelong passion project for me. And when you're going to go on a long journey, it's difficult to go it alone. You need to find like-minded individuals that are willing to go on that crusade with you. And that's exactly what I found at the MRF Institute. The team over at the MRF Institute creates educational content for fitness and wellness professionals who are serious about becoming a part of our healthcare continuum. Getting on the healthcare continuum is all about leveling up our skills to be looked at as that valued resource provider. The wellness paradox is certainly an avenue for you to do that, but we need many different levers to pull if we're going to get there. And the MRF Institute is definitely one of those levers. You can go to their website, mrfinstitute.org, to find all kinds of great, informative, free informational content. And if you choose to engage with any of their paid content, they've created a coupon code specifically for Wellness Paradox listeners. You can enter in WP 2022, that's WP, and then the number 2022 to the website at checkout to receive a 15% discount on your purchase. I highly recommend you go check out mrfinstitute.org. Now back to today's episode. The one other thing I want to talk about before I let you go, and I led with it because I was excited about it. You are someone that is very engaged in the mindfulness community. Yes. And mindfulness is something, as I said, it's very near and dear to my heart. I am someone that believes that mindfulness from a coaching perspective is critical to being a great coach. I also think mindfulness is critical for every single behavior change someone will ever make in their life. Absolutely. And I guess where I'm going with that question is just For our audience of fitness and wellness professionals, touch on the role of mindfulness for them as a practitioner and then for their clients.
Okay. So mindfulness, right? Like it's incredible for me to have been named America's favorite mindfulness coach of 2021. It was a great honor, and it has allowed me, to have access to platforms like this. So for me, right, I think that the mindfulness part is extremely important because it's the first thing to go, right? When you wake up and you have these expressions of emotion, I'm tired, I didn't get enough sleep, my body hurts, or whatever the case may be, that is actually coming from your mind. And the war that you have to win every day is the war between your ears. It's the war in your mind. And most people, Mike, what they do with their brain is the same thing they did with their brain yesterday and the day before yesterday and the day before that, right? And all of those things are taking place in your subconscious mind. 95% of the programming that we have on a day-to-day basis is coming from the subconscious mind. So say the TV's on, the volume is idle, you can barely hear it, it's kind of like white noise, but that programming is happening all day, every day. And those are the beliefs and the stories that we actually believe, whether they're good, bad, right, wrong, or indifferent. So in mindfulness, what we have to do is pay attention to what these stories are. See, at some point in time, somebody said Mike's too small. At some point in time, someone said Mike's not smart enough, right? At some point in time, somebody said Mike's not going to be able to accomplish this. And at some point in time, Mike had to make a decision, right? You had to make a choice and a decision to not buy into and believe that lie that would betray you for the rest of your life if you bought into it and believed it. So you actually had to make a shift to say, hey, listen, I am perfectly okay with the world putting limitations on me, but I am not going to be the person that puts limits on me. And it just starts with a decision, right? To buy into who you are and what you are. So one of the things in practice, right, that I can leave for anyone today is to actually be careful with what you say when you talk to yourself. Right. So when you are brushing your teeth in the morning, getting dressed, right, getting ready for your day, what are you saying when you talk to yourself? Are you saying that you're tired, you're overworked, you're frustrated, you're confused? Because if that's the messaging, you're going to continue to be what? Tired, frustrated, confused, and overworked. But when you versus you shows up, right, the winner in you has the ability to say, my name is Akai Jackson, and I'm a bold, strong, courageous man who is willing to conquer and face any challenge that gets placed in front of me today. And my sole purpose on planet Earth is to facilitate change, make people feel better about themselves, and take people from existing to excelling. When you can boldly say things like that about yourself consistently every single day, you have the ability to take that 5% of your conscious mind, right, and overwork that so that you have the ability to go from existing to excelling. And that is in practice. That is one thing that we put forth every single day with every client that we face. The first thing that we do is write down words of affirmation because it is so important how you talk to yourself.
I love it. And the one thing you said there that I think sticks out more than anything else, it's the stories we tell ourselves. And most of us, at least from my perspective, I'm very curious to get your perspective on this. Most of us walk around not realizing what those stories are in the first place because they're so embedded and they're so ingrained. And it seems like mindfulness gives you some awareness of those stories to shine a spotlight on them to actually consider shifting them.
Yes. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, from 0 to 7, we're like a subconscious sponge, right? You hear things like good is just good enough. You hear things like this is just who I am, right? Like that's probably the one that you'll hear most often. Oh, I can't grow. This is just who I am. Well, that's just a part of that tuning that's been programmed here, right? So, from 0 to 18, a human being has heard you can't, you won't, don't, right? More than 18 million times. And you've heard you can, you will, you are going to, less than 18,000 times. So you're actually programmed to not be successful. You're actually being programmed to not overcome those types of challenges. So, it's actually, making a conscious decision and effort to be able to say things like, I will, I am going to do this, and really just move that needle forward. But listen, it's all about taking action, right? Knowledge will never, ever, 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 ever produce action. Conversely, action will always produce knowledge. So we just got to get moving. We just got to get to doing something. We just have to take massive action, just one little baby step at a time.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. I often like to say that people are long on ideas and knowledge, but they're short on action and execution. And
absolutely.
And that's what we need. The one thing I really take out of this conversation with you is that you are a very inspiring and hopeful person. It's hard to listen to this conversation, at least for me, and stay sitting in my chair because I'm fired up. And I think that one of the last things I'd like you to leave us with before I get to the final question is we're in a rough spot as a world right now. We are.
Yeah.
But I believe you're a man of a lot of hope and a lot of belief. What gives you hope right now for just human well-being and flourishing?
I just like to think that everybody is doing the best they can with who they are and what they have in the present moment. And I believe that there are people, right here, right now, like yourself, like myself, like other practitioners who actually want to make a difference, right? Like I was taught and raised by this, right? If you aren't making other people feel better about themselves, you are wasting your time here on planet Earth. And so for me, it is being able to use every bit of God-given talent and ability, right, to be able to go out there and facilitate change. And I know that I'm not the only person that walks, talks, thinks, and acts like this, right? So my hope and therein lies in the fact that I just know that people want to be the better versions of themselves. I think there's a very intrinsic piece, regardless of how big or how small, where everybody, like, we're programmed to want more, right? It is etched and sketched in DNA that we want more. And it's also etched and sketched in our DNA that we know when something's not right. Right. There are certain things, certain concepts that we just don't understand, like being like having death and having an experience with death or loss. We were not supposed to, we were not designed to experience that. So we actually don't understand it. We don't frame it up. And it's that little turn where something happens and they're like, this isn't right. This just isn't right. See, some people, they'll look at that feeling, right? That gut feeling where they go, this just isn't right. Some people will just go, this isn't right. And then they'll do nothing. And they'll continue to experience this isn't right. This isn't right. And they'll say things like, I hope somebody does something about that. Well, that hope, his name is Akai Jackson, right? That hope, his name is Mike, right? That hope are all the other practitioners inside of our industry who are saying, listen, we got that something's not right. And we just choose to do something better and something different about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's going to lead to my very last question in a moment. But before we get to that, I have no doubt that people who are listening to this are going to want to find out more about you and what you do. And we'll link up to the specific places on the show notes page. But just for the people that are listening, where can people go to find out more about you and IXL today?
So you can find me on Instagram. My personal page is Akai.Jackson, the number 22. My business page is IXL Today. I can also be found on Facebook, same thing, Akai Jackson, and again on Facebook, IXL Today. Mike, I'm actually going to be rolling out some courses here on a platform called Teachable over the next 30, 60 days or so. My first course will roll out in the next 14 days, and it's actually called Become Fearless, where I'm actually going to be giving you applicable tools for you to be able to remove fear from your life and have a life of alignment and achieving your full potential. And then I'll also be rolling out a much longer program. It's actually called 26 Weeks to Live. It's actually a 6-month transformational program where we're going to be taking you through all of the things that I do in real life application with my clients, just deliver it on a platform so that everybody has access to that. So that'll be rolling out. The first course, Become Fearless, be rolling out over the next 10 to 14 days, and I'll get you the information for that. And then the 26 Weeks to Live will be rolling out over the next month and a half or so.
I love it. Yeah. And like I said, I shattered the magic of Hollywood here when I told everyone earlier that we're recording this in December for January, which means that first course will be live and the second one will be close to being live. That's
Yes.
great. And those sound like such amazing tools. We'll link up to all that in the show notes. I follow Akai on social media. He's a great follow. There's a lot of good inspirational information that he's putting out there. Please take a moment to follow him.
Thank you.
Last question for you, Akai, and this is the question I leave all of our guests with, and it's probably the hardest question I'm going to ask you, but I consider the wellness paradox to be the fact that there is a trust, communication, and interaction gap between our fitness and wellness professionals and our allied health and medical professionals. This podcast is about closing off that gap. If you could give fitness and wellness professionals one piece of advice to close that gap off, what would it be?
I think that it's no different than how we help move mental health in the right direction. Connectivity. I think that me as a professional, right, whose background is in personal training, who happens to have a background in psychology, should be able to walk into a nurse's station, a doctor's office, a mental health specialist office, wherever, and be able to say, hi, this is who I am, this is what I do, and I would actually like to partner and build relationships with you. I would like to send people to you, right? I would like to move people in your direction in order for us to help close this gap. And I think that starts with having a conversation, right? Just merely having a conversation. Hey, how can we, like you're doing right now, how can we help close this gap? We can start having conversations, and through those conversations, we can have connectivity. And from that connectivity, we can build a safe community for people to come and be able to get help for mental health, who need help with mental health, whether that is treatment or whether that is, just being taught the coping skills and mechanisms to progressively move forward through life. Regardless of what that need is, because we've built a community through connectivity by having a conversation, should be able to close that gap.
I love it, man. We started with the idea of connection and we end with the idea of connection. We came full circle in less than an hour. Akai Jackson, thank you so much for joining us on the Wellness Paradox.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate you guys. You make today great.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Akai as much as I did. If you found it insightful and informative, please share with your friends and colleagues. Those shares can make a huge difference for us. Any information we'd like to share from today's episode can be found on the show notes page by going to wellnessparadoxpod.com/episode 36. Please be on the lookout for next week's episode when it drops on Wednesday. And if you have a moment, please leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Those reviews are really the best way for us to grow this podcast. Until we chat again next week, please be well.